Hello guys, I figured I'd do a different type of video than I've been uploading to this channel because, as recently the podcasts episodes have been gaining a new audience, and I know that the last one I uploaded, the one I did with Rain Man and Cocktail, that one took longer than I anticipated, and I know a lot of people probably had their patience tested, and so I figured make up for lost time, I'd do a little bonus video just to, talk about like, other types of movies, not just like, stuff I do for the podcast. Because today I actually, so we're right in the middle of a Barnes& and Noble's 50% off for Criterion films. And I went to Barnes& and Noble today and did quite a bit of damage. And so I'm just gonna like show you guys what I purchased today. None of which are blind buys. Everything that I bought, I've seen at least twice. So I'm familiar enough with each of these movies to be able to talk about them. So I'm going to go in from spine order from like the lowest number to the highest. And I'll start with the Lady Vanishes. One of the last films that Alfred Hitchcock made before he left England and went to Hollywood. And it's my personal favorite of his British era films. And it's just a very, fun, breezy mystery film. It's very cozy atmosphere, taking place almost entirely on a train. The funny, not very subtly gay characters who are into, what is it that they're into? Some kind of sport that I'm that's escaping me at the moment, but that's all they care about is like getting to their game on time, all while this murder mystery is happening. It's just a very fun movie. It may not be my favorite Alfred Hitchcock film. I'm probably basic and say that Vertigo is my favorite Hitchcock, but this film I can always put on regardless of whatever mood I'm in and be able to enjoy it. And I can't necessarily say that about Vertigo, even if I like it more. So for better or worse, this is probably like the most entertaining Alfred Hitchcock film. So there you go. Next up is Hiroshima Mon Amour, Alan Rene. A very beguiling film about a French woman who falls in love with a Japanese man, and the psychological turmoil that goes on between them as they think of their own past lives and their own country's history. I'd say its reach successfully manages to hold on to its grasp. I know some people say, they think it's like a little too obtuse for its own good. I personally don't think so. I find it to be a very engrossing, very emotionally captivating film. And it's just also has a great score like that, especially that theme where it goes into the woman's flashback where it's a very, very good film. It manages to be both emotionally captivating while also being very experimental. I like Last Year at Marienbad as much as a lot of other people do, but I do think there are some days where I prefer Hiroshima Mon Amour. So, another great addition. And a good replacement since I lost this in the fire a year and a half ago. So, I'm glad I'm able to get this back in my collection. Next up, I brought in La Règle du Jeu, or The Rules of the Game, Jean Renoir's masterpiece. Just probably one of the greatest ensemble casts ever put on film, and also a very good side performance from the director, because the directors either if they're not cameoing in their film when they're acting in it, they're the lead role. And I always find it very interesting when they instead cast themselves somewhere in the middle, which Jean Renoir does for this movie. So, and he does a really good performance. So he wears both of those hats very, he wears them with ease, is how I would put it. And I always laugh whenever I see Jean Renoir in the bear suit, because I just imagine him trying to, like, be very professional and, like, say, like, okay, you put the camera here, you say your line there, but then, when you get over here, all while he's inside of a bear costume. So that always kind of tickles me whenever I see it. And yeah, probably what I like about Rules of the Game and what I think separates it from, like, other films about, like, class politics is that it doesn't exaggerate the negative qualities of the characters. They're very much they don't feel like they're, like, concocted um, talking points in order to make the political statement that the writers and the director wants to make. They still feel like real, lived-in human beings. So that's one thing that I think really makes Rules of the Game a very special movie, and still highly regarded today. So yeah, and I got the 4K combo there. So whenever I get a chance to, whenever I get around to, being able to see it on a 4K screen, I will be ready to. So another thing that I replaced in the fire. So next up, we're gonna move to Poland. I've got Ashes and Diamonds, Andrzej Wajda, and something I want to show. Look at that drawing of Zbigniew Cybulski. He looks like a Frank Miller comic book, like Sin City. But yeah, that's kind of the film that made Zbigniew Cybulski a bit his breakout role, if you will. Which is interestingly enough, I first saw him in the Saragossa manuscript before I ever saw Ashes and Diamonds. So when I know for some people, when they see Saragossa manuscript, they say, hey, it's the guy from Ashes and Diamonds. But me personally, when I saw this, it's the guy from Saragossa manuscript. So that's kind of an interesting reverse of, breakout star to established role. But for those who don't know about Zbigniew Cybulski, he was kind of like the James Dean of Poland. That's how he was. That's kind of like the nickname he has. And in a way, I feel like this film feels similar to Rebel Without a Cause, to go off of the mirroring of James Dean and Zbigniew Cybulski, because in a way they're both about, like, young people trying to navigate the world in the post-World War, immediately after the World War II happened. Of course, this film's narrative takes place during World War II in the twilight years, and it's just kind of like it captured both. Like Rebel Without a Cause, this film captures the social ennui, the kind of like stumbling culture and the psychological strains that people went through during the time. And it's just a very gripping film and a very beautiful looking film too. So Ashes and Diamonds, glad I have it in my collection. Now we're gonna turn to something a whole lot lighter. It happened one night. Definitely one of my cozy watches. Similarly to The Lady Vanishes, it's one of those films that I can put on no matter what mood I'm in and be able to enjoy. And it helps that it's a road movie, and I'm a big sucker for road movies, but just the chemistry between Colbert and Gable is very, very good. And it is kind of interesting, watching this now, because like before, Frank Capra, he tried to pull the audience's heartstrings with The Bitter Tea of General Zen, because he thought like, oh, that's, a woman's picture, a woman falling in love with her captor, but that ended up not doing very well. Whereas this ended up doing extremely well and got him the Best Picture win. So yeah, very, very light, breezy movie. Very fun. All right, not quite as breezy, but also certainly very romantic. A Matter of Life and Death by the Archers. I lied. I said every film that I bought I've seen at least twice. I've only seen this one once before. But for the longest time, the Archers have been like the most sinful blind spot in my cinephilic collection of films that I've seen. And I recently have been trying to remediate that. And I've seen The Red Shoes, Black Narcissus, Life and Death of Colonel Blimp and The Canterbury Tales. But this one was like a blind buy that I just decided to get about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was just very, very good. It captured me, so I'm definitely very excited about giving this another watch. So yeah, look at that, David Niven. Very beautiful movie. And it, after World War II, it was interesting because like that and Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast both were like fantasy films made after World War II, and I feel like they were kind of like, and you know, It's a Wonderful Life is another example of a film released in that year. So it's kind of interesting to see how people were trying to like bring in fantasy into the world when it seemed like the urge was to capture how dark the world had become since World War II had ended. Anyways, moving on. Next film in my collection, Daisies, or I'm going to attempt this Czech pronunciation, Sedmikruski. Yeah, it's one of the, I would say it's probably one of the funniest films I've ever seen. As if, you know, I really get on, I can easily get on board with Vera Chytilova's very anarchic and chaotic sense of humor. It's a very just a very, you know, I know it's a, you know, it's probably Chytilova's attempt was to, what she wanted to do with this film was to like make like a statement about how depraved and elitist these characters were, and how some people in the Czechoslovakia were at the time. But it's just, I just find it to be a very fun and breezy movie, and I remembered in my college years when I was showing the trailer, or at least I guess like a collection of clips that the Criterion channel put together on their YouTube channel, and my roommates were like constantly laughing at the film, especially during the part where like they were like just walking around like marionettes, because that's what these characters are supposed to be. They're marionettes, and they're walking around, and the footsteps are going. Yeah, it tickled us all, and we wanted to show everyone in our dorm at the time how wild and crazy this film is. But yeah, just also, maybe a hot take, this isn't actually my favorite Vera Chytilova film. That would be Fruit of Paradise, so I hope Criterion or some other label releases that soon. It's probably going to be Criterion, because I think Janus Films owns the rights to that. But yeah, it's a very fun movie, Daisies. Next up, speaking of Czechoslovakia, The Trial. Obviously not a Czech film, but based off of a work by one of the most famous Czech artists ever. You know, not just like authors, I would say artists. And probably the best film adaptation of Franz Kafka ever dramatized in the cinematic form. You know, of course, it's Orson Welles we're talking about here, so it's no surprise how good this turns out. With another example of the director giving himself a side role instead of the lead role, which is interesting for an Orson Welles movie. But we also have Anthony Perkins as Joseph K., Jean Moreau as his rather coquettish and capricious neighbor. And Michael Lonsdale shows up at the end for a very brief role, but it's always nice to see him. Yeah, it's a great cast. Romy Schneider is in this movie, as well as, who's that actor? I'm looking at the cast list here. Akim Tamarov, who was also in The Touch of Evil, the character that got killed and scared the living daylights out of Janet Leigh in that film. But yeah, this is probably just right behind Chimes of Midnight for being one of my all-time Orson Welles top favorite film. And it also comes with a documentary, which I highly recommend to anybody who's into Orson Welles, Filming the Trial. It was technically, he was supposed to be Orson Welles kind of making a sequel or like a follow-up of sorts of when he did filming Othello, the documentary where he talked about, making his version of Othello, and but he actually never ended up finishing his filming the trial documentary. He was giving a Q&A about the trial to a bunch of college students and graduate students, and he was attempted. His plans was to edit the footage together into something, I guess, a documentary form. I don't know what he was planning to do with it, but um, it's actually pretty interesting and entertaining to watch as it is, even if it's technically unfinished, because you just get to see Orson Welles answering questions and just talking about his time making the trial, and talking about other things like Abel Gance, the Napoleon director, who had just died by the time the Q&A was happening. And it was interesting because Orson Welles was very blunt and honest about his approaching the trial, because he said it was never one of his projects that he dreamed of making, about my passion project is to make this film. It was really just kind of like a random selection of titles he was given, and he decided, like, okay, I guess I'll make the trial. But he certainly had a lot of respect for Franz Kafka, and he wanted to do right by him, and I believe he did. So yeah, the trial, one of Orson Welles' best movies, and he certainly agreed. Next up, we have Abbas Kiarostami, The Wind Will Carry Us. His last film, I believe it's his last film that he made on celluloid, because the next one he made after that, yeah, ABC Africa and 10, those were shot digitally. Yeah, I think this is his last film that he shot on film. And it is kind of like an interesting end of an era, and end of a very strong selection of films, like starting from Where's the Friend's Home to Close Up, Life and Nothing More, Through the Olive Trees, Taste of Cherry, and this, just probably one of the best runs in any filmography ever put together. But yeah, it's just I believe this is based off of a poem that was I can't remember her name, but it was the same Iranian poet who made the documentary about the leper colony, and I'm forgetting the name of that documentary too, so I'm not being a very reliable source of information here, but it's just a very sweet film about a journalist who goes to like this very closed off and very close and intimate city or town in Iran, who aren't really the hugest fan of outsiders, and so obviously they're not like very welcoming to this like kind of city folk who is probably using this town as a way to like further his journalism career. But it's follows the same beats that a story like this goes, where like the journalist realizes oh, these people are really human, and I shouldn't be doing this. But the way that Kiarostami executes it is heads and shoulders above like what how anyone else would tackle this topic. It's just a very organic and very surprising and beautiful and very subtle film, as is typical with Kiarostami. So yeah, not much else to say about it, except I like it. Lastly, the last film I bought, I was serious when I said I did a lot of damage, but I was very excited to see that Criterion had restored John Huston's adaptation of James Joyce's The Dead. A film that surprised me with how good it was. Surprised me in the way that it reminded me a lot of Terence Davies' early works, like The Distant Voices Still Lives, The Long Day Closes, and even The House of Mirth to an extent. But it's just a very, very beautiful film. And, I respect John Huston. He was never one of my favorites, but I was very surprised to see that he had a film like this in him, where it's very modernist. It doesn't like necessarily try to undermine any of the traditions that it's depicting here, but it's also at the same time trying to reach beyond the modernist type of I'm trying to think of the word that the proper word, the customs at the time that this takes place in. And his daughter Angelica Houston is in the role of the main character's wife, and reveals a secret to her husband that there was a love that she used to have long before he met her. So the husband has this kind of like soft, mild existential crisis about how there's the parts of his wife, as much as he loves his wife, there's parts of her that he will never know or never understand, and that he kind of like realizes you never really fully know a person, and he just kind of like accepts that, and it's like there's this beautiful tranquility to how Houston executes this concept, and it's just a very, very beautiful film, and very gentle and gorgeous, and it tugs at the heartstrings, but not in a very like obvious or cliched ways. So I'm very happy to have this film on physical media in my collection. So yeah, and also the James Joyce short. I believe I have the copy of The Dubliners, which contains that short, but that one's also really good too. So yeah, so that's it. That's what I bought today, and I hope this video was. I know it's a little bit rambly. I don't have an editing software to cut out all the ums and ahs that I do, and I didn't necessarily script this out. But I hope this video holds you folks over, and gives you a little more bang for your satisfaction for your patience. But I will be working on the next episode soon. I just want to watch, because the Razzie Worst Picture winner is a sequel and a fifth film in an entry, and because I want to do my homework, I want to be able to see the previous 4 films, and thankfully I have seen all of the original Star Trek TV show, so I don't have to I don't have to binge watch anything for the next episode. So but yeah, until then, take it easy, guys, and I'll see you when I see you.